And folks may join us as we're in process, and that's great. And I'll also be sending out the recording. So if you feel like you want to share this with somebody, a loved one whom you think might benefit from it, please feel free to do so. So yes, full moon intentions. I love just the intention of intention. Thank you for sharing that, Alex. And yeah, gratitude, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen with you all, and we can get started. So, and if you're seeing a lot of faces in your Zoom screen and want to be able to see the presentation better, there's a little icon on the top that's kind of a line, and you can just click on that and the faces will get smaller. So you can see the presentation. So in reflecting about the new year, what I wanted to offer, what I know about this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere from a seasonal perspective of what nature's doing, from a nutritional and energetic perspective of what our bodies need, and from an astrological perspective of what's happening, it felt like the word intuition was a really strong one to bring forth. And we'll explore that. Intuition is really about the knowledge within, the knowing within. And I love this word manifest too, right? And that's why I shared the image of the hand, because that word means to bring forth with your hand. That Latin word mano means hand. And so it's a beautiful coming together of listening to the messages inside and then bringing them forth with our hands, right? And kind of shutting out the noise that we might be hearing in the world out there. So just take a breath, kind of settle yourself in to being here in this moment for the next 45 minutes or so. Get comfortable. If you need to grab something, go to the bathroom, please do that right now. You're not going to miss out. And I am just really wondering, you know, how do we slow down, reflect, move into the new year with a fresh perspective, right? Because even though there isn't necessarily any like seasonal change, at least where I live on Abenaki land, there is this kind of collective cultural sense of renewal, and how can we use that to our benefit? And as always, whenever I'm bringing forth information, I want to acknowledge and name all my ancestors, including the ones who raised me and taught me so much about food as medicine, about ritual, about spirituality, about honoring seasonal cycles. And all of my teachers, there have been so many, both human and animal, in the form of illness as well. So I always offer gratitude to all that I've learned and all from whom I've learned. And a brief overview of today is that we'll learn 3 different rituals, or 3 different ways to connect with our intuition, right? Ritual, again, from a Latin word, or 2 words, which means to do again. That's all that ritual really is. We do this thing, let's do it again. So we'll look at those, you know, 3 practices, and then we'll look at how we can take that to a little bit of a deeper place, or a more rhythmic place, to create rituals where we can set intentions on the new moon and then review them on the full moon, and then repeat the cycle for each of the 12 moons of the year. So I wanted to share some quotes from some folks that inspire me. The first is Chani Nicholas, who's an astrologer, a Western sidereal astrologer. Check her out if you want to online. And she says, today's full moon in Cancer is deeply sensitizing and extra nostalgic. So if you're feeling that, let yourself feel that. This lunation clarifies what radical care means for us, both collectively and individually. Cancer is a protective and nurturing sign, so this full moon offers a potent opportunity for us to care for our communities and parent the parts of ourselves that have been neglected. I love that notion of re-parenting ourselves and redefining what care means for us in this moment, right now. So just thinking of that and caring for ourselves, I think about, who or what is kind of the original roots caregiver, right? And it's nature. And we truly are nature. We are creatures. And when we tend to ourselves, we also tend to the earth, and vice versa. It's a reciprocal relationship, right? We came from the earth, we're going back to the earth. And part of tending to ourselves is just looking around, looking at what's happening in the season, looking at how the season is reflecting our mood, reminding us of what happened at this time last year or at different moments in our lives, right? Because life is a cycle. Time is not linear. That's why I love this image of the nautilus, the sacred spiral. So really, life is this constant cycling and returning to different points in the spiral, but meeting those new points in a different way because of what we've learned. So when we pay attention to the earth cycles, the earth responds by showing us how to remain attuned to our intuition, right? As opposed to listening to what we're being told on the outside about how to behave or what to do or how we were raised, right? Nature is always reflecting back to us, it's time to rest, or it's time to grow, or it's time to take action, or it's time to let go, right? Constantly going through the spiral. So instinct is natural, right? It just means kind of like that movement from within. And intuition is kind of the way that we cultivate instinct. And that's why I love this topic. A somatic teacher and explorer named Abigail Rose Clark shared this quote that I also love. There's a cultural pressure to start the new year strong, to set the goals and make big moves. But what if you don't start the new year strong? What if you start it softly? What if you let the winter season guide you? Nature is resting. What if we break up with the cultural obsession with progress and improvement? This time between the full moon today and the new moon on January 21st, which is also the Chinese New Year, is a good time for that breakup. The waning moon, moving from full to new, is a good time to connect with our roots and the practices that root us. So going slow is a wonderful opportunity for that. And finding that balance through the slowness, right? Consider some different ways to be able to attune to what's happening within you. And these are things you can kind of take note of, go back to, reflect on when you eat your next meal, for example. Is there a flavor that's standing out? Ooh, I'm really craving salty, which is typical in the winter, or maybe not, right? Maybe I'm really craving sweet. And just noticing that, paying attention to that, letting that guide you. And tuning into emotion too. And just noticing what you notice. Emotions are part of that cycle, right? They're kind of a microcosm of the macrocosm of other cycles that we experience. The cycle of day into night, the cycle of moon into moon, cycle of season into season. So just noticing if you're feeling an emotion right now and letting that be. This is part of tending to what's happening within. So I love this idea of actually nurturing the nature within, right? A lot of psychologists talk about nature versus nurture, and I don't think they have to be at odds. I think they can actually be united. Because if we are nature, if we are the earth, that is within us. And especially at this Cancer full moon moment, we can really nurture that nature within by listening, by paying attention. That's truly what nurturing is paying attention. And, you know, I think so much about cultural conditioning, right? We all have it within us. We all have different levels of awareness about it, and we all operate from it. But how can we look at that conditioning and see how it's impacting us, our bodies, our minds, our spirits? How can we kind of take it outside and say, this isn't actually me, this is culture, and it's part of what helps me understand my world and my environment, and I don't have to ascribe to it, right? So I love this question, how can we embrace the nature within us as a way to break culture, crack it open, redefine it, and choose what's most meaningful to us from a place of inner knowing? And think about what's coming up for you right now. You know, maybe nothing's coming up, you're listening. Or maybe there's something that has been on your mind about cultural conditioning, the way that you were raised, your family of origin, something that happened over the holidays maybe, or the way you walk in this world, the way that you do your work in the world. All of these different pieces are there to be considered. And think about, what does it look like to externalize the ones that don't want to be inside, that you don't want to operate from anymore? So the first practice that I wanted to share is something that for me feels like a nervous system reset. And our nervous system does kind of switch between these two different modes, right? The activated, or what's sometimes called the sympathetic mode, and the relaxed, or the parasympathetic mode. Both are necessary, both are important, and we can get stuck in one mode or the other. And sometimes the nervous system just kind of needs a little nudge, needs a little support to switch from one mode to the other, right? And people will kind of give the nervous system this support, sometimes with food, or sometimes with caffeine or alcohol, and sometimes with different practices. This one is a really lovely and easy practice that you can do anytime you're feeling ramped up, but would like to settle down, or anytime you're feeling kind of overwhelmed and like the moment is too much, and you want to sort of get a little more energy to move out of overwhelm. So you can turn off your video if you want to, you don't have to, but pick up an object, and I'm gonna just stop my screen share for a moment so you can see me. I have this quartz crystal that I tend to use, but it could be anything, you know, it could be like a glasses case or a little jar, or some people have a case for their earbuds.
I'm just a little bit more comfortable downstairs, and it'll be quieter if you listen to rock and roll videos.
And I'm going to mute everybody just so we can hear a little better. And so what you want to do with this is just pass it back and forth between your hands. I'm doing it kind of up high right now so you can see what I'm doing, but I usually tend to do it just kind of closer to my lap. And you can turn off your video if you want to, or you don't have to. As you get kind of comfortable with the practice, you can even close the eyes if you want to, or you don't have to. And so what this is doing is it's helping the two sides of the brain and the two aspects of the nervous system to communicate with each other. I first found this tool working with a hypnotherapist who's wonderful, who was teaching a lot about cravings and food addiction. And this was one of her tools to help somebody who was having a food craving to get to the other side of the food craving, is to just pick up an object, pass it back and forth. And it's just a wonderful reset, harmonizing the two sides of the brain, helping the nervous system to transition from one mode to the other. So just try it for another moment. And you can put your object down. Did anybody notice anything you want to share? You can share it in the chat if you'd like. Or you can unmute yourself and share. It felt calming. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And this is a movement that children often do. This is a movement that happens with a lot of kind of fiber arts practices like weaving. And it can feel very calming and meditative. Yeah, you felt your tiredness. Absolutely. That's helping you tune into your intuition about what's going on and what's needed. Yes, I think it can be a really great tool for focusing. Thank you for sharing. So, I'm bringing my screen back. And it's just an opportunity. You can do this anytime you want to, so that you're able to just be more aware of what's going on inside and what's needed. PowerPoint really wants us to stay on this slide. So here's a quote from a Vietnamese monk who passed last year, Thich Nhat Hanh. Many of you may know that name. He says, "Letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness." Freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, worry, or anxiety, we cannot be free. So these practices are aimed at that freedom that allows us to be in the moment, having the experience of what's going on in our bodies and what's needed for balance. And speaking of balance, this is a practice that I love, that's again about connecting the two hemispheres of the brain and bringing balance so that we can start to tap in to our intuition. And for me, it really brings up this question about what touches you most about this life in this body on this planet right now. What are you feeling? And I'm really noticing the lack of snow generally where I live, which is so unusual, and just the impact of the changes that are happening to this planet and how that impacts me, how that impacts the community, future generations. And what could you change so that you can let yourself be more deeply moved by the world around you, right? What are the barriers and the obstacles to feeling the awe and the joy and the connection and the suffering of the world around you? And what are the steps to get to that changed place? Perhaps some of the steps are doing these practices that cultivate intuition. And I'd love to take us through this practice of balanced breathing together. And it's one that you can try on your own and practice whenever it makes sense. I like practicing it before eating because it's something I'm already doing, eating. And it's a great thing to kind of tack on to that and build into my day. So balanced breathing, balancing the two hemispheres of the brain for greater clarity, for greater intuition. let's practice together. So take a deep breath and just let it out. And then we'll breathe in for 4 counts. Hold the breath for 2. Breathe out for 4 counts and hold the breath for 2. Rhythmic, repetitive cycle. We'll do this 3 times. So take a nice breath in and let it out. And now breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold for 2. Out, 2, 3, 4, hold for 2. In, 2, 3, 4, hold for 2. Out, 2, 3, 4, hold 2. In, 2, 3, 4, hold for 2. Out, 2, 3, 4, hold for 2. And return to your normal breath. Connecting with that voice within, that wisdom within. What's coming up? What messages are you hearing? What's needed to really feel your aliveness right now? Just taking a moment to take note, either internally or feel free to write down what's coming up. Just in a few words, if that feels helpful to you. Balanced breathing. Yeah, it is. It's so helpful to write it down, right? Because when we do these practices, something comes up, we make note, and then we can build on that understanding. Every time we write something down, we acknowledge it, we put it into the world, we cultivate it, we imagine it, right? Imagination is another lovely Latin etymology word, which basically means the image within. How do I see myself? My imagination and what I project out there is a reflection of how I see myself and a reflection of my future self, of what I want to be putting out into the world, right? We imagine things to create a response in our bodies. And from that response, there's movement, there's inspiration, right? There's that in-breath, there's that freshness, there's an idea. And then from that, change can arise. And from that, something that we may never have imagined or expected can come forward and be born. And imagination is such a powerful tool to also externalize that cultural conditioning and really look at it and say, which parts are mine and which parts do I want to let go of and give back to the earth? So I do feel that writing is a helpful practice in this journey of cultivating intuition, right? Because ultimately intellect, another Latin etymology, that word comes from this concept of binding ourselves to our thoughts. It can feel restrictive, right? Certain thought patterns can be helpful and keep us safe or keep us moving in a direction for a while. But they can also kind of hem us in. So instead of moving from the intellect, how can we move from the intuition, from that knowledge within? And I think tuning into ourselves and tuning into the fact that we are part of the earth, our bodies are the earth's body, such powerful tools to really tune in and then keep cultivating that attunement, because what we put our attention on grows and expands, right? And then we can really begin to trust our intuition and follow it. Even though that might not be culturally very, the most common idea, right? It's out there, and it's the way humans have operated for a very, very long time. So we have that within us. The third practice I want to share is really about that attunement, right? Attunement to the moment. And it's a very simple one. And it's this concept from a psychologist named Stephen Porges, whom you can check out online. He writes a lot about the vagus nerve, which is our first cranial nerve formed in utero. And it travels all the way up the spine to the brain, touching all of our internal organs and picking up messages from them as it travels. And so from this concept of understanding the vagal nerve and how it connects all of who we are, we can start to understand the importance of what's called building vagal tone. So toning or strengthening or communicating with our vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve does like to know what's going on around, because that is what helps to create safety. It's what helps to transition, right, from that sympathetic activated to that parasympathetic relaxed mode. The vagus nerve loves that. So this is a really simple somatic practice for vagal toning that we can do together. And you can turn off your video if you like, or you don't have to. You can start by looking over your left shoulder. Might feel like a nice neck stretch as well. Look over your right shoulder. Just see what you see. Look up and look down. And then just close your eyes for a moment and take a breath in and out. Return to the space and just look around again and see if anything stands out that's different, or that you're noticing in a different way that you haven't before. Toning the vagus nerve, helping it to communicate with all the internal organs as it travels up the spine to the brain. So writing it down, again, can be really a powerful way of cultivating intuition, that knowledge within. And if it resonates with you, pick a time that makes sense. For most folks, either writing for 5 minutes, first thing in the morning, or right before bed, can be a really helpful way to either start the day or close out the day. And once you pick a time, be consistent, kind of stick with it, get it into your daily routines, right? Your daily habits, your daily rituals. And it doesn't have to be anything complex. You can even write, I have nothing to say right now, and close your journal, and that's it. If you want to try balanced breathing or vagal toning, the looking around, right? Or the nervous system reset of passing the object back and forth before you write in your journal, this can kind of help you get out of that mind, thought, intellect state and help open things up before you write. It's an option, not necessary, something to try. And if you're trying to think about what am I going to write about, right? It can be helpful to sort of start a journal and write these questions in the first page so that every time you write, you can just look at the questions and answer them or answer one of them, right? So how am I feeling right now? Just how am I honestly feeling? What emotions are coming up? What am I grateful for? Can be a helpful thing to share. And depending on when you're writing, you know, did I take time to notice my breath and take a deep breath today? Or when will I do that today? When are the moments? Is it before meals? Is it during other transition times, getting into the car or out of the car, for example, coming home? And then how do I want to feel, or how am I feeling at the end of the day, right? Just reflecting on the day. All of these writing prompts can be helpful ways to get into our intuition and just into a writing practice. And again, rituo, do again, something that we repeat over and over again might seem like a habit. And if we put intention around it, intend, that tending within, tending to ourselves within, that habit can actually become a ritual, can actually feel sacred, right? So you can keep wrapping this notion of the sacredness and the everyday into little things that you notice you do every day, like writing in your journal, like sitting down to eat and lighting a candle before meal times, like taking a deep breath in times of transition, right? Many of you have heard me share the story of one of my teachers, Dr. Vasant Lad, who's the lineage carrier of the Ayurvedic healing modality from India. And he loved sharing the story of his mom. She would take a bath, get dressed, light a candle, and sing a song before she even set foot in the kitchen to prepare a meal. So talk about ritual. That's, very kind of elevated, complex form of ritual, right? But it sort of starts to give you an idea of what that might look like in your day to day. So we've talked about, how can I kind of get into my intuitive space with these somatic practices? How can I nurture my intuition by just writing down what I'm noticing every day? Seems simple, but can feel profound. And then how can I wrap that daily practice into a more cyclical practice, right? Cycles of day and night, and cycles of the moons, cycles of the seasons. And this is why I love attuning to the new moon and the full moon, right? We all experience the moon in our world. This is universal human experience. There's this relationship between us and the moon, as well as this relationship between the earth and the moon, the sun, and the planets in the solar system. So it's this way to kind of feel interrelated on this more, sort of universal cosmic level. And it's a wonderful kind of repetitive, calming, clarity generating space to get into. So in terms of new moon ritual, I love the idea of just tuning in, seeing what's going on, and seeing what arises, whether you're just reflecting in your own mind, whether you're writing something down. And from that, seeing if there's an intention, right? How am I going to tend within? How am I going to tend to myself from this new moon to this full moon, right? So kind of trying to just set that intention and then follow the thread of the intention for the 2 weeks between the new and full. And then full moon can be an opportunity to say, that was my intention. How did it play out? How did it manifest in my life? How did it come forward? How did I cultivate it? And then to celebrate that and to say, this is what happened. And maybe it wasn't necessarily what I thought or imagined would happen. And that's okay. That's great. That's information about how I relate to my world and to my environment. And I think that celebration and that reflection is key to then moving forward from a place of intuition, because then our intuition is saying, thank you, I've been heard, and I want to keep this conversation going with you. So new moon and full moon rituals, just doing it again. And as you get into this practice, I love to sort of explore different questions, right? And maybe during the full moon, you're exploring, what am I learning, right? What kinds of messages am I getting? What are the best tools for me to tap into my intuition, really refining that? And it might look different even from the 3 tools I've shared. It might be walking with a friend in nature. It might be connecting with a beloved animal or a beloved tree. It might be something related to food that helps us to get into our intuition. It might be another movement practice, right? It might be a particular repetitive mantra or affirmation or meditation. And then thinking about the new moon as the inspiration, the in-breath, right? And what we're inviting in through our intention. And then thinking of the full moon as the out-breath, the expiration. What are we releasing? What are we letting go of, right? Like Abigail Rose Clark was saying, this period between the full moon and the new moon is that moment of, okay, what are we letting go of actually to make space for intuition, to make space for our intention that'll come on the new moon, January 21st, Chinese New Year. So if these kinds of questions and explorations feel nourishing, supportive to you, I started an academy at the beginning of the pandemic as a space for all of us to gather, to be in community together and to learn from each other. We have incredible teachers who come every new moon and provide that inspiration, that seed for setting our own intentions. And then we all gather every full moon and talk about what's happening in nature, in our bodies, in our lives, and how we can harmonize that with our intentions, with our goals for wellness and what we can let go of. So I'd love to have you as part of the member academy if that feels inspiring. There's also an online portal through my website that you can tap into to get access to a lot of information and a membership for ordering herbs and supplements at a discount if that's exciting to you. And I really think that this, not only the academy, but also taking this time right now today to pause is all about nourishing our essence, which is so important, so supportive. And our bodies hear that, our minds and spirits hear that. Every time we tap into our intuition and give our bodies wisdom, that backing, that strength, that trust, we nourish our essence. We feel more resourced, which is so important in the winter because winter prepares us for summer, as Chinese medicine says. So slowing down, tapping in right now especially is so crucial to building that essence, that vitality that helps us to keep going as we all do. And again, I really encourage you to take the time for breath work. There are lots of breath work teachers out there. Many of them teach online. If you're inspired to dive deeper, always feel free to send me a note and I can send you resources. And you can start with balanced breathing, right? And just think about, out with the old, in with the new. And what does it feel like to be out of balance in that space of the conditioning that can guide us sometimes erroneously? That anxiety, that worry, that fear, self-doubt, hurry, urgency, right? That conditioning. And then what does it feel like to feel in balance? To strengthen our essence, to listen to our intuition, and to follow the cycles of what's happening around us, and to honor the cycles of what's happening within us. And just to review, the 3 practices that can be wonderful daily ones: the nervous system reset, passing the object back and forth, the balanced breathing, and then the somatic practice of attuning to the moment, attuning to the space, attuning to the body in space. All wonderful opportunities. And if one jumps out at you that feels like it really works, grab onto that one and go with that one. And then building upon those daily practices, new moon and full moon rituals, instead of resolutions, which are hard to hold ourselves to, especially for a whole big chunk of time of 12 moons. How about resetting our intention with each moon? Because we're always changing. Change is the nature of reality, right? And by honoring this change and resetting our intention each new moon, I think we can feel more in alignment, inner and outer balance, right? And, you know, if you want more framework for your ritual, you can try having an affirmation at the end. This is just one that I like, and yours can be anything you want it to be. I like to say, I'm grateful for this path, for my life, and for new beginnings. The opportunity to begin again each new moon. It's a beautiful thing. So if you want to become part of our community, I would love to have you. I know everyone in the group would love to have you. We have some amazing teachers coming up this year. So again, on this upcoming new moon, we'll be talking about Chinese cosmology and the rabbit year and what's ahead. Then we'll be talking about European astrology for the year ahead. We have teachers sharing so many different practices, art practices, herbal practices, grief practices, ancestral practices, practices around intuitive eating. So it'd be wonderful to have you join us. And the link is there. I'll also share it in the chat. And you can email me or look on my website to get your questions answered. And I really want to offer my gratitude to all of you for taking the time to be here this morning. I know it often feels like things are rushed and there isn't time to pause. And this is creating the world that we want to see, right? Creating a world that does feel more harmonious, both for ourselves and for the planet and all the creatures that inhabit the planet. So remember to set intentions, to reflect on them, and to celebrate all that has transpired. And to take those moments to really tune in to what's going on inside and what's needed. And I would love to hear what questions people have. You can type them into the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask. I'm happy to hear about anything that's coming up for folks.
I had this question about like from the new moon setting sort of opening to the new inspiration, and then like what does happen after the full moon. And you finally answered that. In the end, you just sort of sit and take it in and let inspiration come. I love that. That's right.
That's right.
It fits so well with what you're saying about the resting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be anything more than that, right? It can just be being. We're so called upon to do in this culture. And actually the doingness sort of arises from the beingness. So thank you for sharing that, Catherine. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm so grateful for people taking the time and being here today. And yeah, as you're headed into your day, carry this with you. Carry the awareness that arises with you. And remember that we can start slowly, right? Nature, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, isn't really starting anything either, right? And in the Southern Hemisphere too, you know, summer is happening. There isn't anything new that's necessarily starting, right? So just give yourself a chance to start slowly, to start intentionally. Slow can be so judged in this culture, but ultimately it's the space, it's the pause that allows the answers to arise. And yeah, those rituals can be great for staying out of the candy drawer for sure. I love that. And absolutely, these can be applied to any aspect of your life. And they're so simple, right? I have a rubber band ball at home that we use for that. And especially when my children are screaming at each other, I say, who wants the rubber band ball? And then one of them gets to have it and pass it back and forth. And it really de-escalates things and brings things down to the earth, right? To our embodied state. Yeah, so glad for everybody to be here. And I did say I would share the link to the Academy. So let me do that. And if it's inspiring to you, consider it. And you can always join and then not be part of it anymore. There's flexibility. It's all about choice. So anything else that's coming up before we close on this nurturing full moon day? Thank you, Mary. So glad you could join us. Thank you all for being here. And yes, please feel free to share the recording and I'll send the PowerPoint as well. My goal is really for these tools and this information to get out there, right? They're not mine. I'm just a messenger of the tools, and I feel like we all have and deserve the access to them. It's our birthright. And we're just remembering things we've known ancestrally. So keep passing on the wisdom so that more people can be affected and moved and enlightened by it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Have a lovely full moon weekend,
You too. Thank you.
Thank
and
you
we'll
so
be in
much
touch.
for great presentation and support.
Oh, thank you for being here. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.